Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the ExploreVM Podcast. Today's episode, we're going to talk about something that's kind of grown into some importance with the changing workforce dynamic of 2020. We're going to talk about VDI security, and with me is an expert in the field. Patrick, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yep. My name is Patrick Coble. I'm the VDI hacker, if you've seen me on Twitter. And basically, I'm an EUC nerd, security nerd that goes and talks about security for VDI specifically, but just overall security of breaking into buildings and penetration testing and all that kind of stuff at Citrix user groups, VMware user groups, Nutanix user groups, and all types of other conferences and virtualization spaces. So I try to get the word out about the security things that I see out there and try to educate people so they can make their VDI deployments more secure.
Awesome. And, obviously security is a very, very important factor when it comes to IT all around. And often it's overlooked, especially, in the year that we've had, a lot of people have rushed to implement VDI. And they've really kind of thrown things together as best they could. And in some cases, security's fallen by the wayside. With the influx of VDI and remote workforce, what are you seeing from an attack front on VDI environments?
Yeah, I think you hit it nail on the head there. I mean, the rapid growth has definitely hurt the security overall because in most deployments that I assess, security is kind of an afterthought. What's in the driver's seat of a virtual desktop deployment is the applications and the user experience. So once that works, people rarely go and turn and disable things and do stuff like that, right? To actually limit what a user or an attacker could do on that virtual machine. So I see that a lot, and this year is no different. If anything, I've done lots and lots of very rushed deployments when people are expanding their existing deployment, which is, very easy with Citrix or VMware or even Microsoft and Amazon. But there's also been people that have still had net new deployments this year, and securing those has been very tough. The other random thing that I see is that people rushed to send everyone home and really didn't have a plan of what that meant. Everyone thought that it was just going to be a month or two. And so one thing that I've seen is patch compliance kind of going out the window. So these corporate computers that have been used to being on the local area network and talking to their SCCM server can no longer ET phone home to it. And so that makes a big problem that this corporate asset is in a home network and it cannot get patched anymore because SCCM says you have to talk to me to talk to it. So no one had Intune on those. No one thought that these devices needed mobile device management or other solutions like Tanium and other things to manage those devices. They just thought, okay, we'll just send them home. It'll be good. And when we do that, now there's things that haven't been patched for months. And they're sitting on an untrusted network with TikToks and Tiger King and, Minecraft at the house. I'm trying to make your internet faster. Have you been having slowness? You're going to answer yes. Yeah, it's been terrible, right? So you may divulge a couple, last four socials, a date of birth or whatever, and then that's where the attack can start. Or let me just see your screen real quick. Can you please click this? Can you please click that? So VDI security is definitely still a big focus of mine and a lot of other people in the community. And this work from home has only kind of expounded the problem because we've added tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of virtual desktops to the whole solution.
And, I wouldn't have thought of patching. Like, that's something that would have completely slipped my mind. When I'm starting to look at, VDI, I would think, application control, VPN, et cetera. And you kind of started touching on this already, but what are some common security pieces overlooked when rolling out VDI? Maybe not even in a rush deployment like we've ran into, but overall planning.
Yeah, I think the overall planning is one of the things that most of us have a struggle with is how many images are we going to need? Right? Are we going to need 1 image, 2 images, 3 images? Well, in the very beginning, a lot of people just had a whole bunch of images. And so that means instead of, 10,000 desktops to patch, they have 10 desktops to patch, 10 golden images, which sounds so much easier. But in the reality of the world, when you seal it and you have to, generalize the image before you seal it and promote it up using any of the solutions, that becomes a little bit more of a task. And then when application A needs to go on this image, but not on that image, but application B needs to go on these three, it just makes it that much more complex. And some of the biggest things that happen is that users can execute anything. That's the most common finding everywhere. Is there's absolutely no application control. If a user finds the exe on the internets, they can click on it. There's no allow list or deny list in most deployments. And there's free solutions from Microsoft and from your antivirus, depending on who you pick, and from other companies, if you want to pay them, that most people just never implement. And then on top of that, the other most common finding is people are sealing their virtual desktops with a domain admin account. We have used that as IT nerds for the past 25, almost 30 years as the easy button. If I put myself in the domain admin group, I can do all the things on the domain and there's no questions asked. But if I seal my image with the domain admin credential and I, as a hacker and attacker, compromise that session, depending on if you haven't changed your password, which most haven't changed your password in more than 90 days or even years, especially in the domain admin, the privileged account space, I can become a domain admin from your user that has no other rights on their computer. And that's called the Mimikatz attack and a privilege escalation attack and Kerber roasting and all the Kerberos based attacks that you're able to do. So those are probably the big ones that I see the most often. And then patching, like we talked about with the images. I go a place that has 10, 15,000 virtual desktops, and it has been patched in 2 to 6 months. And we know, especially with Microsoft, every patch Tuesday is a pile of security patches. Now, some of them might not be remote code execution, run to the hills, Danger Will Robinson things, but they're all very important. And so when it's not deployed, then that just makes it that much easier. And that's not even talking about the endpoints that they're executing it from, like we talked about earlier, that are just straying away because of Tiger King and Fortnite and stuff. But yeah, no application control, and then not limiting access to control panel or run or mapping network drives or things like that where people can just browse around. The only thing that has been, I could definitely say is a positive thing that's happened has been people that are in Horizon deployments actually using NSX, and desktop 1 can't talk to desktop 2. It might be able to talk to the whole rest of the network. So east and west is prevented, but north and south might not be. They may have not figured out all the rules and all the things that it needs to talk to. So that's really good. I love seeing that. But then I also don't like seeing a lot of cloud deployments that have any-inies, allowing anything and everything to access that WVD desktop or that Amazon Workplace. So I think those kind of looking at your firewall rules and knowing what's going on to tighten those bolts up a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Cloud security is still that's a whole other episode. The amount of times people get hacked or lose data because of open S3 buckets, just some of the basics that, being in the field, that's the things I think about when, Joe IT user swipes his credit card and spins up an AWS instance.
Right.
He doesn't realize what he's doing when it comes to security. So looking at your website here, vdisecurity.org, you've got a few different security guides. A couple of them jumped out at me. So when we're looking at other factors that need to be taken into consideration when securing a VDI environment, what else do you look at? And again, you've kind of like been rolling into all of this as we've gone, but like something like that jumped out is like DNS, DHCP, and hypervisor hardening. Again, when you're thinking about VDI, my background is a VI admin, data center, heavy VMware. So like understanding like locking down the hypervisor makes sense to me, but some of these other pieces, some of the network protocol stuff, that's not really my realm. So, if you want to dive into any of those topics, like please do.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of things that are still out there. And I think that's probably the hardest part as an admin, is we all come up in most cases from the support desk on up, right? Learning as we're going, reading, and, usually erupting in flames multiple times as we click on things and reboot things we shouldn't have. And we didn't expect that upgrade to go wrong. And so there is so much knowledge out there on security and other things, but it might have never made it to the admins, right? It's never been distilled down. And in a lot of cases, people just have not had time. And so when I think about a lot of the hardening things, most times it's deployments like we talked about at the very beginning. It's ramming speed as fast as this virtual desktop can get up, as fast as that new SQL server can get up, as fast as that new file server can get up, as fast as that ESX host can get up. So some of these things are thoughts that we have, but in most cases we never have the time. And that's probably the thing that I stress the most to every admin, CIO, and IT leader that I work with is setting aside just an hour a week and then maybe 2 hours a week. Put it on your calendar. Let's look at Patch Tuesday on Wednesday. Let's have a plan, right? We know when it's coming out. Now, there's going to be some that are going to surprise you, but overall, let's have a plan of what we can do so we can all learn together. Another problem that most people have is depending on the size of the organization, they may not have any security staff at all. They may be outsourcing their SOC, which is really only going to help you if it's all done right in an incident. It doesn't help prevent an incident. It's just an alarm system. It's just ADT for your IT things. Okay, that's cool. It's on fire. How did the fire start? Oh, well, we'll have to get back to you on that. How could we have prevented it? But it's that knowledge that people just don't get to experience. And I think that makes it so difficult. And there's so many things to harden, and there's so many layers to just a virtual desktop deployment, from the ESX host up into the OS. But then the OS still needs Active Directory in most cases, right? People are still mostly running Windows workloads. So you're still going to need domain controllers. You're still going to need DHCP. You're going to still need DNS. And those things need to be hardened too, right? And so one of the common findings that you find in an AD security audit is that unsecure updates are allowed in DNS. Well, what can that allow? Well, that could allow an attacker to make a new DNS record from any device. And it will go, oh, okay, yeah, you are print server 3. Now all print server 3 things head that way. And so when things are allowed to just, and I guess that's probably the Achilles heel in many cases of like the Windows operating system. It was built when everyone trusted every device. It was a work group, right? It was a domain, forest, trust. All these things were like, okay, this is all built in. This is great. But in the real world, do you want your default, like if you do domain, and who looks at the computers of something that people audit and it's a default permission that's out there? So when we talk about hardening, it's very difficult to get your head around all the things that could be hardened. And if you just put some time aside to go through your layers, I always call it like the VDI burrito or the VDI taco dip. And that's going from whatever the hypervisor is, its uplinks into the network to the VMs, to Active Directory, to the SQL database, to the domain controllers, to DHCP, to DNS. So just to power on the VM, it takes 10, 20 things working correctly to do that. That's 10 or 20 things you need to look at the best practices for to kind of figure out how to harden. Now, some of it can be a waste of time. I find the most beneficial thing that most IT departments can do is spending time on their privileged accounts. How many people have domain admins? How many service accounts have domain admins? How many things were left in schema admins and enterprise admins from that Exchange upgrade 14 years ago? And it has the same password from 14 years ago. And what have we learned about passwords in 14 years? A whole lot, because it's probably just password 123. The Hackers movie's cool or something, right? Like, I mean, who knows what that password's going to be? And when we ever get a pen test where we're able to break people's passwords in domain, people are floored with what passwords are allowed to go through. So I could say, as a security nerd, go and spend time hardening all the things. But in most cases, if you don't start with your privileged account audits and you don't start with what your regular users can do on workstations or virtual desktops, right? Even if they're on a PC, they shouldn't be able to click anything and run it. That is more time and money well spent than trying to figure out how to harden your DNS server. But There are lots of documents out there. Microsoft does a great job. You just have to hunt for it, right? So you need to break your deployment down into the layers, into bite-sized pieces instead of trying to eat the whole elephant in one bite, right? You've got to just take your time and know that it's not going to be secure, hacker-proof, anything, because nothing's ever going to be that. But what we want to do as admins is try to make it secure, make positive movement, even if it's baby steps. Baby steps are better than no steps.
I mean, that's all really good information. Sorry, I was just about to take a sip of my tea.
No, I know. I got you mid-tea. That was my fault.
That is quite all right. You go. All right. So, you said you presented a lot at, user groups across all of the various like technologies, vMugs, Nutanix, et cetera. So kind of open forum. What are some topics that are like top of mind for you right now? Or, you've got, I'd like to think an okay sized audience with the podcast here. A lot of historically, again, a lot of data center background, but again, like we're getting more and more to security, cloud, et cetera. So what message would you like to get out there? What's something that we can all kind of help to work with on security, or how do we keep TikTok from ruining the corporate network, or anything that you're seeing? Again, open forum, please be my guest.
Yeah, no. I think it's tough. And depending on your job role, you may have a whole lot to manage, and you barely may have enough time to keep the lights on and the VMs running and the data center happy and the networks pinging and DNS having a good yellow page lookup for every machine in your network so that the thing can talk and all that. I think the biggest message is, one of the things that I think, even when I came up through the ranks and going through schools and classes and the military and all that, is, security was always something that was like talked about, but just never really implemented. And no one really gave anyone any frameworks, or like there is like a security for dummies kind of book, right? There's Security Plus, which is a great foundation. And then there's, of course, CISP and things like that. And then there's things that are more offensive and defensive that are much more technical. What I would probably say is if you just looked at a study guide of like a Security Plus or a CISP, just the study guide, and just kind of look through those questions, think about if you could even answer those for your deployment. Because and I think the people that are listening to this that are at a public company, right, that's publicly traded, or some international company, you're the ones that need to definitely look at it more and listen, because you don't want to be the one in an orange jumpsuit, right? There's been a lot of security breaches, and most of the time the leaders are there, but you don't want it to be, quote, your fault in that situation. You don't want the finger to go to you. And I mean, that's like IT 101 of just like how everyone's like, oh, he did it, they rebooted it, you did that. And, in many cases, yeah, I did reboot the thing and it broke it, I'll admit it. So it's taking a little time to put a little security knowledge in there to try to see what you could do with whatever you're in charge of. So even if you are the vSAN administrator, it's like, okay, I understand what vSAN is. Well, what about like data at rest encryption? Is it worth it for what you're doing? Data at rest encryption is super cool, but is it overkill? Will the performance, hurt with what you're doing? Do you have some super high end database? And so with those types of questions and answers, you kind of have to learn what your workload is and how things work for where you are, because the mileage always vary. I can always just say, hey, go, to make sure your password policies are strong, make sure your service accounts have a naming standard, make sure no one is in domain admins, enterprise admins, schema admins, all these built-in account operator groups and other things. And then make sure you make new groups that give the correct permissions to the correct users. But it's the same thing we talked about just a little bit ago, is just trying to make your bite-sized pieces and just look around what you're in charge of, and whatever that product is, just type in the name of it and go to security best practices and kind of look at it, because there's always usually going to be some documentation on it. You're not the only one running that solution. And in most cases, the more popular your solution is, like say you're running an ESX hypervisor over Hyper-V, there's still a lot of ESX out there. You have the best opportunity to find out a lot of good security settings because so many more people are using it. So if you're using some of the best of breed technologies when it comes to your hypervisor, to even, going down to the hypervisor and below, which would be like Nutanix and other HCI platforms and stuff like that, you have a lot of resources that can help you make it more secure, and it can be step by step. But the only thing I would ever advise with that is when you start practically applying these security controls, make sure you're using whatever your change control is. Don't just Leroy Jenkins it and hope for the best. You don't want to draw aggro from your bosses and, cause everyone to lose the quest and not get any loot. So definitely do that. But it's I think just spending a little time, and just like I said before, maybe not just a calendar appointment for you to make sure you do patches on Patch Tuesday on Wednesday, but maybe just trying to find out more about the products that you deployed to find out what the best practices are. Because if you can fix them now, that's only going to help you in the future.
That is all awesome advice, and I thank you for that. And I think this is going to be a very good episode of the show. And we've already called out your website and your Twitter account. But if my guests want to reach out to you, where else is there any other places they can find you? Or
yeah. So probably the most common would be Twitter, right? And then of course you can find me on LinkedIn. But then another one would be like the World of EUC Slack. So I'm on there. And then I'm in the other Slacks like iGel community because I really like their thin clients. I like what they're doing. And so you can probably find me on most major things for sure to come find me. There's lots of cool stuff. And, I speak a lot. And I guess right now is probably going to be the best time because in that sense, I'm more recorded than ever because normally I would be doing all these things in person. And I just did a presentation while I was at a Cub Scout camp out on Saturday for a presentation that I was going to do in Greece for E2E VC. So it was pretty funny that my computer, I had 2 bars of 4G and joined the GoToWebinar, and it worked, which was amazing. But it was, you can definitely find me. Probably Twitter is the easiest. LinkedIn is there, but I live, I guess, a public life in that of doing all these speeches. This is probably one of my favorite sessions that I've got to do a couple times now. I got to do it for the Atlanta VMUG and Nashville VMUG, which was really fun. And the way the camera stuff works out there, I was actually able to bring my tools and show a little bit of like how you break into here and there, which was really neat. And I wouldn't have really been able to do it normally because I don't like to carry those things on a plane because I already carry lockpicks all the time, and I have been questioned many times for those. Right. But if you start bringing like badge cloners and under the door tools and all that stuff on your plane, it's gonna, especially if you're not checking it, I guess. If you checked it, it'd probably be no big deal, but you get some strange looks. So.
Right, for sure. Well, it sounds like we've got a few ideas for some future episodes. I'll definitely be reaching out to you about that. But, I want to say thank you for your time today. I appreciate this.
No problem. Thank you so much. This was great. And I hope everyone learned a little bit and can go click on a couple things. Don't Leroy Jenkins it, but try to secure a couple things and read about it and learn about the things that you're already in charge of to make it more better.
And thank you for listening. I'm kicking off the 4th season of the ExploreVM podcast with a slightly different format. Episodes will be around 30 minutes and in some cases consist of 3 different guests with their own segments, probably about 10 minutes each. It's all about evolving the content and keeping the show interesting. And also, I want to thank everyone for their years of listenership. I appreciate all of the followers and the subscribers. 2020 was an off year for the podcast, but I did start another show, the Blocks and Bytes Grilling and Technology Show on YouTube. Take a watch and let me know what you think. If you'd like to continue the conversation around today's topic, have an idea for a show, or would like to be a guest on the ExploreVM podcast, please reach out to me on Twitter @ExploreVM, email me, paul@ExploreVM.com, or on Facebook, facebook.com/ExploreVM. Once again, thank you for listening.